The price of betrayal. What does it cost? For Daniel Herrera, it was nothing. He thought he could discard his wife of 10 years, the woman who had built his world, like old news. He believed he could parade his new, young model, Sophia, at the most exclusive event of the year, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala, and call it a victory. He imagined his ex-wife, Clara, sitting at home, shattered and irrelevant. But he forgot one crucial detail. When you push someone into the mud, you have no idea who they'll meet when they get up. Tonight, Daniel Herrera is about to learn that lesson in front of Madrid's elite, because his past is about to walk through the door, and his future is holding it open. A new beginning for him. The air in the penthouse overlooking Retiro Park was thick with the aroma of expensive cologne and a latent arrogance. Daniel adjusted the silk lapels of his custom Dior tuxedo, catching his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. The city lights twinkled below, a sprawling kingdom he felt he was finally ready to rule. "How do I look?" he asked, though it wasn't a question but a demand for affirmation. Sophia, draped on the white leather sofa, looked up from her phone. Her dress was a testament to Daniel's recent bonus, a fiery, backless number that clung to her toned body. "Like €1,000,000, darling. No, €1 billion," she said with a smile that showed off her perfectly veneered teeth. Daniel's smile widened. $1 billion. He liked the sound of that. It was aspirational. For now, he was a senior vice president at Elite Cross Capital, a respectable private equity firm. But respectability wasn't the goal. Dominance was. And tonight, the Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala was his coronation. "This dress is everything, Daniel. I'm going to be the talk of the party," Sophia said, standing up to twirl. "We will be the talk of the party," he corrected her, his voice soft but firm. He walked over and placed his hands on her waist. "This is our debut. The world needs to see the new Daniel Herrera, the real Daniel Herrera." The unspoken part hung in the air, not the Daniel and Clara Herrera. Clara, his ex-wife. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but the bitter taste still lingered in his mouth. Not from regret, but from annoyance. The proceedings had been a hassle, a tedious breaking away from a life he had outgrown. They had been together for 10 years, since university. He now saw her as a relic of his past, a black and white photograph in his new full-color life. He remembered her always in sensible clothes, her hair tied back, her hands smudged with charcoal or paint from her hobbies. She had been an architecture student when they met, brimming with passion. "I want to design spaces that breathe," she used to say. But her ambition had been quietly set aside year after year to support his. She had managed their home, hosted his work dinners, proofread his reports, and celebrated his promotions as if they were her own. She had been the perfect corporate wife, the scaffolding that allowed him to build his career, and like all scaffolding, she was meant to be taken down once the structure was complete. The final argument played on a loop in his head, a scene he had edited for his own convenience. "You don't even see me anymore, Daniel," Clara had said, her voice trembling but not breaking. She was standing in the kitchen of their old home, which she herself had lovingly renovated. "I see you, Clara. I just don't think we want the same things anymore," he had replied coldly, glancing at his watch. He had a dinner reservation with Sophia. "What is it that I want that's so different?" she had asked, her eyes pleading. "Are you content?" he had said, the word sounding like an insult on his tongue. "Are you happy with this house, with your little art projects? My world is getting bigger. I need someone who can keep up." He had conveniently omitted the part where she had found the hotel receipts, the lingerie he hadn't bought for her, the smiling photos of him and Sophia on a business trip to the coast. He had framed the narrative for himself, and for their few remaining mutual friends, as a conscious uncoupling, a divergence of paths. He was flying to the stratosphere. She was content to remain on the ground. "Do you think she'll find out about tonight?" Sophia asked, pulling him from his reverie. She was applying the final coat of ruby-red lipstick. Daniel scoffed. "Who, Clara? God, I hope so. I hope someone sends her a link to a gossip column. Maybe then she'll understand what she lost." He pictured her in her small apartment across the river on the outskirts, probably sketching something no one would ever see, or reading a book. The image filled him with a satisfying sense of superiority. He had won. "Ready to go?" He held out his arm. "Ready to make an entrance?" Sophia purred, taking it away. As the elevator descended, Daniel felt a surge of adrenaline. The gala wasn't just a party. It was a battlefield of influence and perception. It was where deals were whispered over champagne, and fortunes were measured by the cut of a suit or the sparkle of a diamond. Tonight, with Sophia on his arm, he wasn't just attending. He was making a statement. He was powerful. He was desirable. And he had broken free from the quiet, unpretentious past that was his first wife. He was completely, blissfully unaware of the fact that scaffolding, once removed, can reveal a masterpiece that was hidden in plain sight, and that masterpieces, unlike shiny new buildings, are timeless and priceless. In Daniel's mind, what's his biggest motivation for bringing Sophia to the gala? Is it about love or something else entirely? A different kind of entrance. The car pulled up to the grand, lit entrance of the Arts Foundation Museum. A river of luxury vehicles flowed around them, depositing Madrid's high society onto a plush red carpet that wound its way up the iconic steps. The air crackled with the flash of cameras and the low hum of excited chatter. "Showtime," Daniel whispered, squeezing Sophia's hand. A uniformed attendant opened their door, and they stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The paparazzi, initially focused on a Hollywood actress ahead of them, swung some lenses their way. Daniel straightened his tie, a practiced motion of casual importance. He guided Sophia forward, his hand placed proprietarily on the small of her back. She played her part to perfection, smiling dazzlingly, tilting her head as so. A siren in scarlet. They were a vision of modern success, the impeccably suited financier and his beautiful young companion. Some photographers yelled, "Over here, big smile." They knew he was from elite Cross Capital, a firm with deep pockets and a growing reputation. They were worth a few shots. Inside, the grand hall had been transformed into an ethereal wonderland. Towering arrangements of white orchids and crystal branches reached for the vaulted ceiling. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, balancing trays of glittering champagne flutes and intricate canapes. The sound was a symphony of clinking glass, sophisticated laughter, and the soft swell of a string quartet playing in a distant corner. Daniel breathed it all in. This was his element. "Daniel, my boy!" a voice boomed. It was Roberto Finch, a managing director from a rival firm, a man whose respect Daniel craved. "Roberto, good to see you," Daniel said, shaking his hand with a confident warmth. "Do you know my partner, Sophia?" "A pleasure," Finch said, his eyes doing a quick appreciative scan of Sophia's dress. "You two make quite a pair. Cross Capital must be treating you well." "Can't complain," Daniel said, with a modest shrug that was anything but. As they moved deeper into the crowd, Daniel felt the effect of their arrival. He saw the glances, the whispers behind hands. He saw some of his colleagues' wives look Sophia up and down, with a mix of envy and disdain, which he found particularly amusing. He saw Patricia Langara, the city's most notorious gossip columnist, making a mental note of their presence. Perfect. By morning, their picture would be on page 6, cementing his new status. He was a conqueror. Enjoying his spoils, he steered Sophia toward the main ballroom, making a point of stopping and chatting with everyone who mattered. He was charming, witty, and utterly magnetic. He introduced Sophia not just as his partner, but with little asides. The brilliant marketing mind behind. Or, oh, the woman with the impeccable eye for style, giving her a veneer of substance that he felt reflected well on him. "I'm so glad we came," Sophia whispered, her eyes wide with the glamour of it all. "This is a different world." "Get used to it," he said softly. "This is our world now." His gaze swept the room, and he felt a pang of something he refused to name. He saw couples who had been married for decades, men and women who had weathered storms together. He saw the easy comfort between them, the shared smiles that spoke of a deep history. It reminded him, just for a second, of how he and Clara used to be at these things. She would always stay close, her hand finding his in the crowd, a silent signal of support. She knew who to talk to, who to avoid, who had the real power versus the illusion of it. She had been his social navigator. He pushed the thought away. That was the old Daniel, the dependent Daniel. He didn't need a navigator anymore. He was the captain of his own ship. Then he saw exactly who he was looking for. His boss, the formidable CEO of Cross Capital, Mr. Gerardo Del Rio, was standing with a small group near the silent auction exhibit. Del Rio was an industry titan, a man whose approval could make or break careers. "Wait here, Sophia," Daniel instructed, handing her a champagne flute. "Time to pay my respects." He approached, putting on his most serious, ambitious face. "Mr. Del Rio, a wonderful night." Del Rio turned, his expression neutral. "Herrera, good of you to come. The firm must be represented." He didn't introduce Daniel to the men he was with. A subtle but clear power play. "Of course, sir. It's the event of the season," Daniel said, trying to elbow his way into the conversation. "That new tech sector acquisition was a masterstroke, by the way. The numbers look even better than projected." Del Rio nodded curtly. "We're pleased." His attention was already wandering. It was clear the conversation was over. Slightly rebuffed but undeterred, Daniel retreated. It didn't matter. His presence had been noted. He rejoined Sophia, his ego still completely inflated. He had the beautiful woman, the high-powered job, the bright future. He was untouchable. It was then that the atmosphere in the grand hall began to change. It wasn't loud or sudden. It was a subtle shift in pressure, like the air before a storm. The murmur of the crowd quieted, then began to swell again, but with a different tone. Heads were turning, not in a general scan of the room, but in one specific direction, towards the grand entrance. A wave of focused silence was spreading from the door inward. The photographers, who had been lazily taking shots of the crowd, suddenly scrambled toward the red carpet, their flashes firing in a frantic, continuous barrage. "What's happening?" Sophia asked, standing on tiptoes to see over the crowd. Did a movie star arrive? Daniel craned his neck, annoyed by the interruption, and then he saw the reason for the commotion. A car, not a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, but a rare and incredibly sleek Bugatti Chiron. A ghost of €1,000,000 car. It had pulled up. It was the type of vehicle that announced not just wealth, but a different stratosphere of existence. A uniformed doorman, looking flustered and overly deferential, rushed to open the passenger door. Daniel watched, slightly curious. Who could command this kind of attention? And then he saw her. A woman emerged from the car. The crowd between them parted for a moment, creating a perfect, unobstructed view from the ballroom entrance to the front steps. For a split second, his brain refused to process the image. It was like seeing a ghost, but a ghost reimagined by a master artist. It was Clara, but it wasn't the Clara he knew. This was not the woman of sensible shoes and quiet cardigans. This woman wore a midnight blue Chanel silk gown, a custom creation that seemed to pour over her figure, shimmering under the lights. It was elegant, daring, and absolutely breathtaking. Her hair, once pinned back, was now styled in loose, glamorous waves that cascaded over her bare shoulders. Around her neck was a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that didn't just sparkle, but blazed, catching the light from every direction. Daniel's champagne glass suddenly felt heavy in his hand. His mouth went dry, and Sophia's question from earlier echoed in his mind. A cruel torment from a universe that was suddenly tilting violently on its axis. Do you think she'll find out about tonight? She had not only found out, she had arrived. And as a man stepped out of the driver's side of the hypercar, a man who exuded a quiet, impregnable confidence that made Daniel's own bluster seem like a child's tantrum, Daniel Herrera realized that his perfectly constructed world was about to be shattered into a million pieces. How do you think Daniel's colleagues and boss will react to Clara's arrival, knowing her connection to him? The aftermath. The man who stepped out of the Bugatti was Nicolas de la Vega. The name itself carried weight in rooms like this, but it was spoken in low, reverent tones, not shouted by paparazzi. De la Vega was not new money, nor was he simply old money. He was dynastic money, a fortune rooted in European shipping and banking that had been skillfully pivoted into 21st century tech and sustainable energy. At 42, he was the CEO of De La Vega Innovations, a global giant that would swallow companies like Cross Capital for breakfast. He was notoriously private, rarely photographed, and his presence at any event instantly became the event. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored black tuxedo, no flashy watch, no ostentatious jewelry. He didn't need it. His presence was his statement. He walked around the car and offered his hand to Clara. The way he looked at her was not the possessive stare Daniel gave Sophia. It was a look of genuine admiration and deep affection. He said something to her, too low for anyone else to hear, and she laughed. It was the sound of her laughter that hit Daniel like a physical blow. It was lighter than he remembered, freer. It was a sound he hadn't heard in years, a sound he had unknowingly stifled. The crowd, which had parted out of curiosity, now parted out of respect. Nicolas de la Vega and his stunning companion began their ascent of the steps. The flashes were blinding. Daniel, who is that?" Sophia's voice was sharp, with a new note of panic. The confidence had evaporated from her face, replaced by a confused frown. "That woman looks familiar." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat was a concrete knot. He felt 100 pairs of eyes on him. People who knew him knew of his divorce now, looked from the radiant vision in the doorway to him and his scarlet-clad partner. The comparison was brutal. He felt a hot, stinging shame creeping up his neck. He and Sophia had tried to make a splash. Clara and her companion had just created a tsunami. That's Clara!" He finally choked out the name. It tasted like ash. Sophia's jaw dropped. Her perfectly painted lips parted in disbelief. "That's Clara, your ex-wife. The one you said was normal?" Her voice was an incredulous squeal. She looked from Clara back to Daniel, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt, of reevaluation, entered her eyes. Clara and Nicholas paused at the top of the steps. He guided her with a light touch on her elbow. Their movements were fluid and assured. They didn't walk in search of attention. They simply commanded it. As they entered the grand hall, the string quartet seemed to falter for a moment before resuming. Gerardo del Rio, Daniel's boss, who had barely given him the time of day just minutes before, immediately broke away from his conversation and began to move toward the entrance with a determined stride. A shark that smells blood, or in this case money, in the water. "Nicolas! What a pleasant surprise!" Del Rio boomed, his voice now dripping with a fawning that was nauseating to witness. Nicholas greeted him with a polite, reserved nod. "Gerardo, a good event for a worthy cause." His gaze was calm, not missing the frantic energy his arrival had caused. And then his eyes, deep and intelligent blue, swept the room and landed for a brief, chilling moment on Daniel. There was no malice in the look, no anger. There was something far worse, complete and utter indifference. It was the look a man gives something he is about to step on without noticing. But Clara's eyes also found him. Their gazes crossed across the sea of slack-jawed faces. Daniel had expected to see triumph in her eyes, or perhaps a flicker of old pain. He saw neither. He saw a quiet, clear-eyed strength he had never seen before. It was the look of a woman who knew her own worth, a woman who was no longer defined by him or his opinion of her. In that single gaze, she stripped him of all his power. She was not the cast-off wife. She was a queen who had simply moved to a bigger palace. The realization crashed down on Daniel with the force of a physical impact. This was not just a chance meeting. This was a statement. But it wasn't Clara's statement to him. It was a statement to the world about who she was now. He was simply an insignificant spectator to her ascension. The whispers erupted around him, venomous and quick. Is that Daniel Herrera's ex? My God, what did he do to her? That's Nicolas de la Vega, from De la Vega Innovations. He's with her. I heard the divorce was messy. She clearly landed on her feet, and on a pile of gold. Look at Daniel's face. And who is he with? It's tacky. The word tacky hit Sophia like a slap. She winced. Her scarlet dress, suddenly, felt cheap and loud next to Clara's timeless elegance. The looks of admiration she had received earlier now felt like mockery. She was no longer a prize. She was a consolation prize, and a bad one at that. She looked at Daniel, not with adoration, but with accusation. His promises of a bigger, better world were crumbling before her very eyes. He had sold her a ticket to the A-list, but it appeared his ex-wife owned the whole venue. Daniel felt trapped. He wanted to run, to disappear, but he was frozen in place, a statue of humiliation in a Tom Ford tuxedo. He had come to the gala to be the man, but in the space of 5 minutes, he had become the joke. Clara, guided by Nicolas, began to move toward the main ballroom, greeting a few people with a warm, genuine smile. She moved with a grace he never knew she possessed. He had always seen her as grounded, practical. He never realized that with the right support, grounded people can fly. He watched as his boss, Mr. Del Rio, fawned over Nicolas, laughing too loudly at something he said. Then Del Rio turned and gestured to Clara with profound respect. They were headed toward them, not toward him, but toward the main podium at the front of the ballroom. Their path would take them directly past where Daniel and Sophia were standing, rooted in their own personal hell. The moment he had dreaded was now inevitable. A confrontation was coming. But as Clara walked toward him, looking regal and serene, he knew with nauseating certainty that this would not be a confrontation of equals. It would be an execution. In this moment of confrontation, what do you think is the most devastating thing Clara could say or do to Daniel and Sophia? The unveiling. The few feet of Persian carpet that separated them felt like a mile-long walk of shame. The air thinned around Daniel. Every rustle of Clara's Chanel gown seemed to mock the synthetic glitter of Sophia's dress. Nicolas de la Vega walked with the unhurried rhythm of a man who owns every room he enters. His eyes were focused forward, but Daniel felt his peripheral power. Mr. Del Rio, still attached to Nicolas's side like a pilot fish to a shark, was the one who saw Daniel first. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, as if Daniel were an unfortunately placed piece of furniture in his path. "Herrera!" His tone was clipped and dismissive. Nicolas and Clara stopped. The moment was suspended in time. The ambient noise of the gala seemed to fade into a dull roar, focusing all sound and light on this impossibly awkward tableau. Clara looked at Daniel, her expression serene. There was no anger, no pity. It was the polite, distant look one gives an old colleague from a job long past. "Daniel," she said, her voice even and cold. It was the first time she had said his name, and it sounded strange. Clinical. Daniel's pride, bruised and battered, made one final, pathetic stand. He felt an overwhelming need to assert himself, to prove he wasn't the pathetic figure everyone saw now. He made a stiff gesture toward Sophia, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Clara, do you remember Sophia?" he said, the words coming out harsher than he intended. It was a petty, desperate jab, an attempt to remind her of the reason their marriage had ended. Clara's gaze settled on Sophia for a split second. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't the greeting of an equal, but a dismissal. She didn't even say her name. She had rendered Sophia utterly insignificant, without a single word. Sophia visibly winced, her face reddening to a shade that clashed horribly with her dress. Nicolas de la Vega, who had remained silent, finally spoke. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He looked directly at Daniel, but his words were for his boss. "Gerardo," he said, his tone dangerously smooth. "I wasn't aware that Cross Capital was a part of our current philanthropic portfolio." Mr. Del Rio blanched. "Nicolas, we are huge admirers of the Foundation's work. We contribute annually." "Admirable," Nicolas replied, his eyes still fixed on Daniel. He then shifted his gaze slightly to include Sophia. "The Foundation's work this year is focused on supporting emerging female artists and designers, women of substance and vision who perhaps have been overlooked." He let the words hang in the air, each one a perfectly aimed dart. Daniel felt his blood run cold, but the masterstroke was yet to come. Nicolas turned his full attention back to Clara, his expression softening into one of genuine pride. He placed a hand gently on her back. "But introductions are in order," his voice now projecting slightly for those nearby to hear. "Gerardo, I don't believe you've been formally introduced to my fiancée." A collective gasp was audible from the surrounding guests. Fiancée. The word detonated in the center of the room. This was no fling. It was no rebound. It was a commitment to one of the most elusive and powerful men in the world. Del Rio's eyes widened in shock, then in a frantic, dawning comprehension. He looked from Clara's serene face to Daniel's horrified one. The professional calculus was happening in his head at lightning speed. "My sincerest congratulations, Nicolas, to both of you," Del Rio stammered, extending a hand to Clara. "A pleasure, Gerardo," Clara responded, using her maiden name. She shook his hand firmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Daniel felt the world spin. Laura. She had shed his name. She had shed everything related to him. But Nicolas wasn't finished. This was not a simple social slaying. It was a methodical dissection. "But you are mistaken about one thing, Gerardo," Nicolas continued, a faint, sharp smile touching his lips. "Clara is not just my fiancée. She is the reason we are all here tonight." He gestured vaguely toward the stage at the far end of the ballroom. "The Foundation's centerpiece project this year, the one my company has underwritten with a €50 million grant, is the new De La Vega Contemporary Design Wing at the museum." Mr. Del Rio nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, of course. We've all been eagerly awaiting the design reveal tonight." Nicholas's smile widened. He looked at Clara with pure adoration. "Then allow me to introduce the creative force behind it. The winner of the International Blind Competition, the lead architect and designer of the entire De La Vega wing, Ms. Clara Lara." Silence. A deep, resonant silence fell over the gala. Daniel Herrera felt the floor sink beneath him. It couldn't be. The little art projects, the sketches he had dismissed, the passion he had called a hobby, it was all real. While he was climbing his greasy ladder, she had been secretly building an empire of her own. She hadn't just landed on her feet, she had built her own damn launch pad. Mr. Del Rio's jaw was on the floor, completely stunned. He looked at Clara with a brand new kind of respect, one that bordered on awe. Then he looked at Daniel with a murderous, dawning rage. He finally understood. Daniel Herrera, his arrogant, smug vice president, had discarded a woman who was now inextricably linked to a €50 million project with Nicolas de la Vega, a man Del Rio had been trying to get a meeting with for over a year. The humiliation was absolute. It was a public, professional, and personal annihilation. Daniel had come to the gala to show off his brilliant new life, only to have the woman he threw away unveiled as the real masterpiece of the evening. Clara gave a small, elegant nod. "I look forward to presenting the final designs later tonight," she said calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Nicolas and I have some people to see." With that, they moved on. The crowd parted for them, like the Red Sea. They left Daniel standing there, a hollow shell of a man next to a woman in a red dress, who was just beginning to look at him with pure and unadulterated contempt. The whispers started again, but now they weren't just gossip. They were his professional obituary, being written in real time. What do you think is the biggest difference between the way Clara and Daniel handle their new lives? The price of arrogance. The rest of the evening was a blur of exquisite torture for Daniel. He and Sophia remained frozen in place for a few moments, the epicenter of a shockwave of gossip that was now radiating through the gala at light speed. Every whispered conversation, every pointing finger, every smirk, was a fresh stab of humiliation. Sophia was the first to break. "You told me she was a nobody," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You said she was a sad little artist living in a shoebox. You said I was the upgrade. How was I supposed to know?" Daniel snapped back, his voice cracking. "She was so guarded, so lost. She never, ever did anything like this before." "Maybe because you never let her." Sophia's eyes were cold and calculating. She was reevaluating her investment, and the stock was plummeting. The life of glamour Daniel had promised was a lie, a cheap imitation of the real thing. The life Clara now inhabited effortlessly. Sophia wasn't an upgrade. She had been scammed. Before Daniel could respond, Mr. Del Rio was back. His face was a thundercloud. He grabbed Daniel's arm with an iron grip and steered him forcefully into a secluded alcove behind a marble column. "Are you an idiot, Herrera?" Del Rio growled, his voice a lethal whisper. "Or are you just terminally stupid?" "Sir, I had no idea." "Shut up," Del Rio cut him off. "Just shut up. Do you have any idea what you've done? We've been trying to do business with De La Vega Innovations for 2 years. Our entire new tech fund strategy hinges on getting a piece of his new energy portfolio. I've been calling his office every week, getting stonewalled by his assistants, and tonight I finally meet him. And who is he engaged to? My vice president's ex-wife, you moron. The woman you cheated on and left. The woman who is now the lead designer on his €50 million legacy project. Do you see the problem here, Daniel? Connect the dots for me. Daniel's mind was a blank wall of panic. I can fix this. I can talk to her. Del Rio let out a short, barking laugh that was devoid of humor. You'll do no such thing. You will not go near Ms. Lara or Mr. De La Vega. You will take your date. He said the word with utter disgust. And you will leave, quietly, out a side door. My office? Monday, 8 a.m. He paused. Sharp, Del Rio said, his voice dropping to an icy calm that was more terrifying than his rage. And I suggest you spend the weekend updating your resume. He turned and walked away, leaving Daniel trembling, his career flashing before his eyes. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Clara and Nicolas had been graciously welcomed to the head table, hosted by the museum director and the heads of the foundation. The conversation was lively, centered on art, architecture, and the future of design. Clara spoke with an eloquence and passion that captivated everyone. She was not just a fiancée, she was a visionary in her own right. Later, during a quiet moment, as they stood on a private balcony overlooking the city, Nicholas draped a cashmere shawl around her shoulders. Are you okay? He asked softly, his concern genuine. Clara looked at the glittering skyline of the same city Daniel had looked at from his penthouse. But her view was different. She wasn't trying to conquer it. She was a part of it. I am, she said, and she meant it. For years I felt like a shadow. I thought his validation was the only thing that made me real. Seeing him tonight, I felt no anger. I felt no revenge. I felt nothing. He's just a man I used to know. She turned to Nicolas, her eyes shining with gratitude. You saw something in me, Nicolas, when I couldn't even see it in myself. He smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I saw a brilliant artist. I saw a woman of incredible strength and integrity who deserved to have her name in lights, not hidden in the footnotes of someone else's story. I just provided the frame. You are the masterpiece. Their moment was interrupted by applause from the ballroom. The presentation was starting. It was time for Clara to take the stage. Back in the alcove, Daniel's world had completely collapsed. He turned to go back to Sophia and tell her they were leaving, but she was already gone. He scanned the crowd and saw her. She was talking to Roberto Finch, the director from the rival firm. She was laughing at something he said, placing a delicate hand on his arm. Her scarlet dress, a beacon of opportunism. She had already cut her losses and was looking for her next investor. Defeated, Daniel staggered toward a side exit, ignoring the curious and pitying glances. As he pushed the door into the cold night air, the sound of applause echoed from the ballroom, followed by the clear, confident voice of the museum director. And now, it is my great honor to welcome to the stage the creative genius behind the new wing, the one and only Ms. Clara Lara. Daniel didn't look back. He couldn't bear it. He had entered the gala thinking he was the king of his own story, only to become a footnote in hers. Do you think Daniel deserved his fate? Or was it an overly cruel form of karma, a priceless masterpiece? 2 weeks later, the city was still buzzing. The society pages and architecture magazines were filled with breathless praise for the De La Vega wing. Clara Lara was the talk of the town, lauded not as a billionaire's fiancée, but as a formidable new talent in the world of design. Her vision, a fusion of sustainable materials and human-centered, light-filled spaces, was hailed as revolutionary. Clara stood in the middle of a cavernous, sun-drenched loft downtown, which now served as the headquarters of her design studio. Blueprints were spread out on huge oak tables, and a team of brilliant young architects was animatedly discussing material samples. The air buzzed with creativity and purpose. This was her world, a world she had built from the ashes of her old life. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from Nicholas. "Thinking of you. Don't work too hard. The world can wait a day for its next beautiful building." She smiled. Their relationship was a calm harbor in her busy new life. He never overshadowed her, never competed with her. He simply celebrated her success, finding as much joy in it as she did. He was a partner, not an owner. There was a soft knock on her office door. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Sophia, peeked her head in. "Ms. Lara, there's a delivery for you." A messenger brought a large, flat cardboard box. "He insists on giving it to you in person." Intrigued, Clara opened it. Inside was a framed article clipped from a major financial newspaper. The headline read, "Shakeup at Cross Capital. Senior Vice President Daniel Herrera departs amid restructuring." Below the article, someone had taped a juicier clipping from a gossip column. It was a photo of Sophia, arm in arm with Roberto Finch, at a different event. The caption read, "The capital's newest power couple, financier Roberto Finch, and the dazzling Sophia look inseparable these days." Clara looked at the clippings for a long moment. There was no triumph, no gloating. There was just a quiet sense of closure, like closing the last page of a long, difficult book. Daniel's downfall had been as swift as it was brutal. Fired from Cross Capital, he had become toxic overnight. No respectable firm would touch him. He was a case study on how not to manage your personal and professional life. His obsession with image had led to the destruction of his own. Sophia, true to form, had jumped from his sinking ship to the next available yacht. Clara slid the clippings into a drawer, out of sight and out of mind. They were relics of a past that no longer held any power over her. Her future was here, in this studio, in the lines of the buildings she would create. That afternoon, she walked the construction site at the museum. The initial foundation had been laid. She ran her hand over the cool, smooth concrete, the literal and metaphorical foundation of her new life. Nicholas found her there, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like a professor than a billionaire. He didn't ask her about Daniel. He didn't need to. He simply handed her a hard hat and a cup of hot coffee. "It's going to be magnificent," he said, looking at the sprawling site, his eyes full of pride for her. "Yes," Clara agreed, looking not at the construction, but at the clear blue sky above. It was. She had been the scaffolding for someone else's dream. Now she was the architect of her own, a future built on a foundation of self-worth, talent, and a love that wasn't about ownership, but about partnership. She had lost a life she thought she wanted, only to build one that was beyond her wildest dreams. And she had done it, not by finding a billionaire, but by finding herself first. He was just the beautiful, supportive partner who had arrived at the perfect time to watch her shine. 6 months had passed since the gala. Madrid's winter had thawed into a vibrant spring, and with it, the steel skeleton of the De La Vega wing had begun to rise against the skyline. It was a tangible monument to Clara's new reality. She now spent most of her days on site, her custom Chanel dress replaced by practical tailored trousers, steel-toed boots, and a white hard hat that had Lara written on the side. She moved with authority, her voice clear and decisive, as she conferred with engineers and construction foremen. She was not just the designer, she was the conductor of a symphony of creation, and she had never felt more alive. Her relationship with Nicholas had deepened, settling into the comfortable rhythm of a true partnership. He was her most fervent supporter and her wisest counsel, but he never tried to solve her problems for her. He understood that her power came from her own agency. One afternoon, As she was reviewing a complex wiring schematic in her on-site trailer, her assistant Sophia called, looking unusually hesitant. "Ms. Lara," Sophia began. "There's a man here. He has a letter for you. He insists on giving it to you in person." Clara looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "I'm busy, Sophia. Ask him to leave it with you." "I tried, ma'am," Sophia said, her voice dropping. "It's Daniel Herrera." Clara froze. The name felt like a relic from another time, a ghost at the feast. She hadn't seen or heard from him since that night. She had heard the whispers that he had been forced to sell the penthouse, that he was living in a small rented apartment on the outskirts, that he was consulting, the universal euphemism for unemployed. A cold knot of dread formed in her stomach. Part of her wanted to tell Sophia to have security remove him. But curiosity, and perhaps the last lingering thread of a shared history, won out. "All right, send him in." Daniel walked into the trailer. The change was shocking. The impeccably tailored Dior tuxedo was gone, replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting blazer. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look in his eyes. He was thinner, and the lines of failure were etched around his mouth. He clutched a simple white envelope in his hand, as if it were a life raft. "Clara!" His voice was hoarse. "Daniel?" She responded coolly, not getting up, not offering him a seat. She remained behind her large desk. The blueprints lay between them like a barricade. "What do you want?" "I wanted to give you this," he said, stepping forward and placing the envelope on the edge of her desk. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I just want you to read it. That's all I ask." She looked at the envelope, then at his haggard face. The powerful, intimidating man she had once been married to was gone. In his place was a stranger, hollowed out by his own choices. "Fine," she said. "You've delivered it. You can go now." He looked up, a flash of his old frustration showing. "Can't we just talk for 5 minutes, for old time's sake?" "We have nothing to talk about, Daniel," Clara said, her voice firm but not cruel. "Our time is over. Please leave." Defeated, he nodded slowly and walked out of the trailer, his footsteps shuffling like a man twice his age. Clara stared at the envelope for a long time before finally picking it up. Inside was a 2-page, handwritten letter. It was a rambling, self-pitying mess. He wrote of his regret and his mistakes, but it was all framed in the language of a victim. He spoke of the pressure of his job, of how he strayed, of how he missed the simple life they used to have. He never mentioned Sophia by name, referring to her only as a terrible lapse in judgment. The final paragraph was the true purpose of the letter. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, Clara, but seeing what you are building, it reminds me of the dreams we used to share. I'm in a difficult place. A word from you to Nicolas, or anyone, really, could turn it all around for me. I just need a second chance to get back on my feet. I'm not asking for charity, just to have a door opened for the man I once was." Clara put the letter down, a deep sadness washing over her. Not for him, but for the woman she had been. The woman who would have believed in this pathetic manipulation. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught and lost everything. He didn't miss her. He missed what she provided for him. That night, she showed the letter to Nicolas. He read it, his expression unreadable, and handed it back to her. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply. "The old me would have felt guilty," Clara confessed. "She would have felt responsible. She would have made the call." "And the you who is here now?" Nicolas prompted gently. Clara looked around her beautiful, peaceful home. Then she thought of the structure rising at the museum. "The me who is here now knows that second chances are earned, not begged for, and that you can't build a new future on a rotten foundation." She knew she couldn't leave him unanswered. Silence to a man like Daniel could be misconstrued as a possibility. She needed to send a final, definitive message. The next day, she went to a storage unit where a few boxes from her old life remained. She found what she was looking for: a worn, leather-bound sketchbook from her early years of marriage. Its pages were filled with her brilliant early designs: innovative suburban homes, community centers, a bold proposal for a library cantilevered over a river. These were the dreams she had shared with him, the ones he had condescendingly called her little projects. She did not write a letter. She simply opened the sketchbook to a detailed drawing of a light-filled public atrium, a design that was a clear predecessor to the central courtyard of the De La Vega wing. On the bottom of the page, in her clear architectural handwriting, she wrote only 7 words. "I was always building, you just couldn't see." She sent the sketchbook to his address, with no return address. It was not an act of revenge, but an act of truth. It was giving him back his own blindness. Weeks later, in his bland apartment, Daniel received the package. He opened it and stared at the sketchbook. Slowly he turned the pages, each drawing a testament to a talent he had actively ignored and dismissed. He finally saw her, not as his wife or his ex-wife, but as the brilliant woman she had always been. He sank onto his sofa, the open sketchbook in his lap, and for the first time he felt no anger or self-pity. He felt the vast, hollow weight of his loss. He hadn't lost a wife. He had discarded a fortune of a different kind, a treasure of talent and spirit. He had been too arrogant and too foolish to recognize it. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he would spend the rest of his life in the shadow of the world she was building. And that is the story of how a night of calculated arrogance led to a lifetime of karmic justice. It is a powerful reminder that your worth is never determined by who you leave or who leaves you. It is determined by what you build within yourself. Daniel thought he was the prize, but he was just the price Clara had to pay for her own freedom. Her final triumph was not entering with a billionaire. It was entering as herself, powerful and whole. What did you think of Clara's incredible transformation and Daniel's downfall? Have you ever witnessed a moment of karma so perfect and unexpected? If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another of our real-life dramas.